the first speaker here. This is Thomas, who I've learned today is a Ethereum core developer and the founder of Nethermind, as well as TwinStake. And he's going to be talking about bringing core staking innovations to L2 and to institutions. So with our first topic, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, so for the last 5-6 years, I've been working very closely with the core development of Ethereum, working on the implementation of Nethermind node, and then building lots of integrations. And in the last few months, particularly looking a lot into the rollups, the plans for decentralization, for staking on rollups, the fees, MEV, and so on. So working with Flashbots also for the last 2-3 years. And TwinStake actually was created 1.5 years ago as a collaboration between the financial institutions world and the core development team at Nethermind. So there's a joint venture between Weban from the Brevin Howard family and Nethermind team. And that's why we talk together about the EIPs and institutions. So thinking about how exactly we're bridging that thinking process from the internals of the core development all the way to how it affects the big players on the market, how it affects the markets actually. And this was really thinking always for Nethermind, thinking about creating the approach to developing Ethereum in a way which brings the ideas, the thinking of products for the largest of the institutions, and slowly bringing the all financial markets and governance and the world to Ethereum. It's happening now. Maybe it wasn't that obvious a few years ago when we were all starting. And when you think about all the L2s, which is a big thing happening now for Ethereum, right? So all the scalability comes with the layer 2s, and this is L2Beat, fantastic dashboards that tracks layer 2s. There is huge expectations. There are huge expectations about L2s bringing new opportunities for staking, for additional yield. And I think it's still not very clear how each of those major L2s think about Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync, Scroll, Starknet, Polygon, and so on, how exactly they will resolve the staking opportunities for their centralization of their protocols. And some of these conversations in the last few months take a lot of different paths, showing that it's still probably 1 year ahead for many of those L2s to decide where exactly they'll be going with the centralization. And some of the models that were appearing recently are the based rollups, which are very strongly promoted or maybe explained and discussed under leadership from Justin Drake, and the proof of governance, which kind of got the name from John Charbonneau's research. And the first one says that L1 will actually be the place for sequencing layer 2s. So if we have things like Ethereum and Tyco as a rollup, or you can think of Optimism as a rollup, it will be the block builders that will be sending transactions to the smart contract on layer 1. The smart contract on layer 1 will do the basic verification whether those blocks proposed by the proposers are valid, or following the most basic formatting parameters and content rules of what transactions can be included. And then, depending on the ordering of the incoming transactions within the smart contract, we'll be receiving the information about sequencing on L2, like the ordering of blocks on L2. Canonical L2 will be constructed entirely within the internals of the smart contract on L1. How it affects the staking and the yields? Well, it actually brings all the MEV to the layer 1 validators. So how does it really happen? Normally when you have the MEV payment, it goes to, majority of it nowadays goes to the validators on the actual chain that we are sequencing. So the payments from the MEV block builders are being shared with the validators, and here the validator is actually the builder of the layer 1 block. So the sequencer of the layer 2 is looking at these layer 2 transactions and inputs them inside the layer 1. And if different layer 2 blocks are competing with each other, then actually the ordering between them is being resolved by which one pays the most to the layer 1 builder. So layer 1 builder captures all the MEV. So as we know that much of the Ethereum staking nowadays is institutional, all that MEV will be flowing to the institutions and, well, all the solo stakers as well on L1 if the base rollups are being adopted. And the additional proposal is that with the base rollups, we actually have the cross-chain atomic sequencing with the ability to use the layer 1 as this coordination layer of pushing the blocks that can be handling all the bridging atomically between different L2s. The second proposal with the proof of governance also affects a lot our thinking about the staking, because it very likely suggests that some of the L2s, if they follow the proof of governance model, which is like an extension of the centralized sequencer, extension in a way that instead of having one controller like the foundation or the core builder of the network designating a single sequencer, proof of governance says that that role is delegated to the token holders that represent the governance, either token holders or other governance mechanism that defines L2 governance. And they select a small group of sequencers, and they can vote them in or vote them out. So there are no protocol rules for adding or removing permissionlessly the sequencers. It's just all voted in. Now, it means that usually we have the staking for protocols like Tendermint or solutions similar to Polygon proof of stake staking that define the need for the block rewards and the yields to the sequencers on layer 2. For the simple sequencing that is delegated by the foundation, like centralized sequencers or the proof of governance sequencers, those payments are usually much, much lower because you introduce more of the trusted sequencing. So it's trusted or governed, overseen sequencing, and you don't have to manage the security of the network through the stake that is being slashed, really, because the slashing appears by simply voting the validator out. A few other things that probably are already widely discussed in many other presentations here, so I'll skim over them a bit more fast. So restaking, bringing the additional opportunities for those who are operating validators on layer 1 to get additional yield from using the same deposited ETH and staking it again for securing other rollups. And while we can expect that the existing major L2s will bring some of their own solutions for securing the chains, they most likely will use their own native tokens, or as we mentioned, the centralized or proof of governance sequencers. With restaking, we can expect that something like rollup as a service models will very often try to borrow the security from the main Ethereum chain. And now, from the institutional perspective, this is probably much more risky than what we see now in a very basic vanilla staking on Ethereum. Institutions even nowadays are a bit timid to go with the liquid staking solutions. Even Lido for many of the compliance teams is a bit too far. So using smart contracts to go there, using something that starts to look like DeFi, it's not accepted by many of the institutional teams for compliance or any regulations. So with restaking, I think that much of the delivered added value from the operators will be an ability to provide the very detailed risk assessment and auditing of the behavior of the chains that are reusing the stake from the layer 1. So we'll have institutions cherry picking the absolutely top, well audited and tested and trusted chains that will be borrowing from layer 1, borrowing security for the restaking like Icon layer. DVT solutions, so things like Obol, SSV, also a few other solutions, I think SafeStake, Diva, Claystack. probably others. So this is bringing the distributed validators to Ethereum, so distributed validator keys, bringing potentially additional geographical diversity, additional support for the limited downtime for mostly solo stakers, but also potentially bringing down the insurance costs for the large operators. So we may expect the institutions will be slowly demanding the distributed validator implementations. However, there is some balancing expected, as the distributed validator operations usually will be bringing up the costs of operations for the node operators. So on one side, we'll have increased costs. On the other side, we may have the decreased cost of insurance and the pressure from the clients to introduce it for additional safety and geographical decentralization. So when you think about the inactivity leak problems, those might be actually solved by the fact that we'll be operating distributed validators in assets where the different validators will be in totally different locations. So if some of the regions go down, then the other regions will be maintaining the key signing. Now, one more thing that I'm believing that for L2s will be quite important is that we can expect the proving markets to appear. However, for the proving markets, I feel that they will not bring the same opportunities as staking. So we'll not be talking about yields, but the sheer computation payment. So more like for those institutions that are asking, is there business for us? Thinking about, is it something to add on top of the yield? Very likely not, but we'll see. Maybe there'll be some innovation here. Now, quick overview of a few EIPs that are coming to Ethereum. So 7002 execution layer triggerable exits. This, I believe, is something that, for me, was expected for the longest time. It brings the ability to invoke the exit from the Ethereum consensus layer, exit of the deposit, back to the withdrawal address without interaction with the node operator. So it brings this like fully non-custodial feel to the institutions. Nowadays, institutions have to expect that they can communicate with the node operator that will pre-sign for them the voluntary exit messages. This makes it, at the beginning, a bit awkward, because for regulatory purposes, many of the node operators say that they are non-custodial. But for a very short moment, or at the time when the deposit is made and before we signing the withdrawals, this is not the case. And with the previous EIP 7002 coming in the hard fork, in the network upgrade, probably the one after Cancun, then the one that comes now actually fixes like it in a faster way, in a simpler way. So now when you're signing the voluntary exit, there used to be a security mechanism that was saying that it's valid only for the 2 network upgrades. With 7044, this becomes perpetually valid, which means that there is slightly less risk before we introduce 7002 for those exits to become like custodial again. EIP 4788, so access to the beacon block root in the EVM. It's very important. It connects the execution layer with the consensus layer in a way that the execution layer can read all the data related to the consensus layer behavior, which means that in the consensus layer, you have all the information about the rewards, about the exits, about slashings, and suddenly you can create set of the financial instruments for institutions to manage better the risks related to slashing. So you can build some automated on-chain insurance products. You can start creating the yield-related derivatives, where you may say that there is, like you convert floating to fixed by saying that if there is more validators joining the network than planned, then we actually pay out that difference on the, so we know that when more validators come to the network, then the yield drops. So if I want to change it to the fixed payment, then I would like to actually read the information about how many validators are joining the network and make some kind of derivative product that pays the difference on the execution layer. And the same for restaking, both this one and, this one. So when we think the forcing exits by restaking, on slashing from the restaked validators, and tracking the security levels, actually knowing from the restaking position. So if I'm reusing my deposit to secure some layer 2, and the deposit actually exits layer 1 or is becoming slashed, I want to know about it as fast as possible and possibly react on the execution layer. So if 4788, I will have the access to that. Now, EIP 7251, it was a bit more famous, so there were a few blog posts about it. The max effective balance increase. It says that no longer we're talking about staking only 32 ETH per validator, or like per validator infrastructure set. If we have large node operator for institution, very often they'll be accepting like deposits in the size of tens of thousands of ETH or more. And for all of this now, there's lots of validators and the beacon chain clients that have to be operated. There's also a significant cost of sending deposits and creating the keys for withdrawals for all of those. So if 7251, we can expect significant cost reduction for operating the infrastructure for the large depositors. So I have slightly mixed feelings about this one, because it feels like it brings some potential cost savings to the large operators, which is usually seen as a centralizing force, but probably this is negligible comparing to all the other centralization effects that we already have to deal with. And the last thing that I want to mention, so recently Coinbase announced the identity verification and KYC solutions on chain based on Ethereum attestation service. And somehow I believe that the Ethereum attestation service will be one of the most important things that will be happening on the institutional side on Ethereum in the next few years. So from the very beginning of working on Ethereum, I was thinking that creating robust systems for reputation tracking and for claims, they will be actually bringing the certifications and claims for the reputable institutions from the off-chain world and bringing them all to the on-chain will help us to start bringing the same like under collateralization for finance and the same level of checks and creating of the like tracking of the safe assets on-chain as we have in the traditional finance, which means that we don't really have to get the connection between the off-chain and on-chain world. We don't need it. We do it nowadays only for the reason that data does not exist on-chain yet, that we've built over many, many years, like tens or hundreds of years, the sets of certifications and rules and attestations that exist in the off-chain world. So we can ask people about credentials, we can ask universities to confirm whether they graduated the university, we can ask the professional bodies about certifications, we can ask large financial institutions whether the assets that are deposited in a given account can be tracked all the way to the source. As soon as we manage to move all those certifications and credentials on-chain, no longer will need to connect the two worlds. So institutions that will try to KYC the assets flowing to their, let's say, DeFi protocols, will be able to verify everything, every single claim on chain. Now, I think this is very much related to the many discussions about the censorship on the protocol level. There is some expectations very often that, or maybe there is a risk that the protocol builders, the core developers, facing the needs of the governments and institutions, have to bring the tools of following like the sanctions of particular countries, restrictions, censorship on the protocol level. The truth is that if you don't introduce it on the protocol level, then there is absolutely no limitation to introduce it on the level of the of the asset zones, or like attestation zones. I can still restrict the flow of funds towards the institutionalized DeFi, towards the on-ramp and off-ramp zones, by tracking properly the on-chain KYC and attestations. So if I'm an institution that doesn't want to deal with the tainted assets, with assets that have some kind of negative claims on them, of the source that cannot be verified and so on, then I may join the set of contracts that are always tracking the source all the way to minting or some clear certified on-ramp sources. So what I expect is that entirely neutral protocols will be hosting the zones of totally clean assets that are fully certified, and those will be much more liquid and accepted by particular sets of institutions and governments. And there might be different subsets of assets on the chain. So we'll slowly see a bit of compartmentalization of assets on chain. And we don't need to introduce that on the protocol level, because this will happen nonetheless. And this will introduce also a bit more of a acceptance that there must be some kind of coexistence of this compartmentalized asset zones on a single protocol. Because the rules, the sanctions may change over time, and there's no need for breaching. And that separation can be introduced on the smart contracts level. Maybe for many of us, it might be feeling like as a disappointment, but I think it's unavoidable. And on one side, it tells institutions that the chain will be seen soon as a fully regulated space with all the certifications and KYC and KYB on chain. But it also tells the whoever tries to fight for privacy brings that answer that on chain, the space of the contracts that they will be able to interact with will be limited over time, and it will be tightening, and the liquidity will be always much, much drier, because any privacy-oriented transfers will have to go through this like tainted asset zones, a bit like probably nowadays like gray black markets. Thank you so much for listening, and if there are any questions, if there's time for questions.
Yeah, I think we have time for a few questions from the audience here. I'd like to take the first one here, which is, you mentioned EIP 7002, and that one's very near and dear to my heart. And I noticed it did not meet, it didn't get in, I don't believe, or at least currently under consideration, unless I'm wrong, the Cancun DNAB update. But there's talk of it coming in, I guess it's Electra that's going to be the next one. Can you comment on that, or maybe share some thoughts about what the community can do to start advocating for its inclusion?
Maybe improving that communication between the needs of institutions towards the builders. So any teams that connect, that build products for institutions and also are responsible for maintaining chains will be able to push for updates like this. However, when we think about current core dev teams, they're very often already connected to institutions. So as I showed, TwinStake is kind of collaboration of Nethermind with enterprises. Besu, Teku come with the space of consensus, connecting lots of enterprises to the needs of the core builders. Coinbase collaborates with Optimism and Prism teams. So I'm not sure. I think this seems quite obvious that we need it. Maybe the ideation, formalization required some time and people to just feel a bit more comfortable with it and to actually start understanding the power. So maybe through the talks like this and more conversations about what changes for users, it's easier to implement this.
Perfect. Are there any other questions from the audience here?
Hi. Quick question on one of the last points that you raised. I don't know whether I understood well, but if I understood correctly, you were mentioning that certain, let's say, functions should be integrated at protocol level rather than application level. The problem is that if they are integrated at protocol level, that significantly increases the risk of regulatory capture. Because, for instance, under the markets and crypto assets regulation, there is the infamous reciter which says that unless the services are provided in a fully decentralized manner, whatever that might mean, then potentially they might be within scope of the regulation itself. So wouldn't you say that there should be full and complete separation between the protocol and the application layer at all times, so that the protocol is unassailable, so to speak, and then effectively at the application layer, well, then there's the opportunity to either go down the unregulated route or the regulated route. Thank you.
So the same on the other side, like I want to try to make sure that I understand properly the suggestion. So I'm not saying that this will happen on protocol levels. I think that protocol should be seen more and more as a technological layer that is totally disconnected from the decisions on where are the assets separated. That hopefully regulators will accept the fact that there will be total traceability and separation of assets according to their required rules based on the claims that the protocol supports. It's just the claims as a very technical system. The claims will not be named or specified in the protocol. The protocol just supports claims because of its primitives that are supported, like signatures and so on. And the claim systems through the very neutral set of smart contracts are landing on Ethereum, are available. So I think that that's what we should push for, that we will not accept any regulatory capture on the protocol level, that the core developers will not be following any specific rules of sanctions, not because they want to lead to avoidance of those mechanisms, but because we know that those mechanisms can be extremely efficiently introduced on chain through the set of smart contracts and claims, which means that any regulator that has control over some assets will know that they practically can fully control the flow of those assets and the direction and track the source. I think this is unavoidable, but also it says that, this gives us a bit of ability to make clear claim that, well, protocol is neutral, but it doesn't really change anything. Whether you split it between two chains or you just split it between two asset zones on the same chain, the result is the same.
All right, well, thank you very much. Please, another round of applause for our speaker this morning.